welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. It's really a pleasure to have you with us today as we embark on another program that talks about the things that are really important in this world and in this life. New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Our guest today, and I'll get into all of the other particulars later on, but our guest today, he is both a publisher as well as an author. We're going to talk a little bit about that, especially considering that yours truly is trying to get his book finished and then published. It's Mike Stickler. He is a highly gifted, best-selling author, publisher, producer, philanthropist, and he's internationally sought after conference speaker as well. His best-selling book, which is, I think it's pronounced Bundy, American Terrorist, Patriot. Okay, interesting connection. Quickly made the bestseller list, and he's got several other works as well as his latest, which is Without Reservation. And we want to welcome him. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Richard, for having me.
There's a certain element of familiarity here, only because I have a brother named Mike.
All right, we have a cosmic connection, you and I. Then
there you go. There you go. Now, you are both a publisher and an author. Is that because you published your own works, or did you have another company until you started your publishing to do that for you?
So I've been writing since 2000. In fact, Richard, if you and I had met on an airplane, I would introduce myself as a publisher, as an author, because I see myself more as an author than anything else. I've written 19 books, 4 of which were bestsellers. The other 15 are books that got me the learning experience that I needed to be able to get to the bestseller categories. And so I love to write. And what happened was I got into publishing when a book I had called Journey to Generosity, I was trying to get some traction with it. It was with a traditional publisher at that time, back in 2013, and they were doing it. Nothing was happening. They weren't selling it. They weren't marketing it. They got it into print form, but I needed that book sold. And so I wrestled my book away from them. I actually had to pay him to get the book back. And then I went into trying to figure out how to publish them. And once I got going and I learned where people are buying books and how people are, what they're looking for in a book, I really drilled in, and with no intention whatsoever of starting a publishing firm, I started a publishing firm called Leadership Books, and now we have about 2,200 SKUs on our site, books from all over the world in the leadership space.
Well, that's a subject that I'd like to touch upon for this program, as well as other subjects in terms of your other works and where you're coming from and how you've gotten to where you are today. But leadership, the qualities of leadership are, there is no question in my mind anyway, they're being challenged these days by virtue of some of the leaders that we have in various quarters, both governmental and political, industrial, corporate, business, and so forth, religious, economic. I mean, you list any category you want, and there are leadership positions, and in some instances there are leaders. What makes a good leader?
Service. Plain and simple, being able to serve the constituent that you are leading. I wake up every day with the idea of how can I make my team's job easier? How can I help them and equip them and strengthen them in their tasks, give them the education and the tools to do a fantastic job. If you don't serve those who follow you, you're just a guy who is autocratically, or a woman who's autocratically telling people what to do. And I think that crisis you see right now is exactly the symptom of it, whether it's the government who forgets that they serve the people,
Mm-hmm.
or in the boardroom who forgets that they serve the shareholders, or the leaders of corporations who forget that they serve their employees. This idea that we are just to do what they tell us to do because somehow they think they're smarter than us it's not tenable. People are not going to put up with it very long. And the truth is, they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nobody knows my life better than I know my life, and I still don't know it that well. And I don't know your and I don't know your life all that well. I mean, I know roughly where you live and those kinds of things, but I don't know your life. And to try to sit here from Northern Nevada and tell you how to live and how to serve and how to do and how to be is ludicrous. And that's what we're experiencing, especially on the coast. From the East and the West Coast, you're seeing a lot of that. And what you're also seeing, I think it's really fundamental to the problem of why we see so much division, because the rest of the country is sometimes, with derision, they call us the flyover states. They reject that. They reject people telling them how to live, and they should. And that same thing applies to in the boardroom or in the business sector. We think we have an idea of what's going on with our employees or our shareholders, but we don't, and we have to have a little humility.
I have to say that in my positions over the years that I've been doing this, I've had the position predominantly as operations manager of different radio stations, both in Phoenix and here in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
And I took on a tack very early, in the early 80s. I referred to it, and I, no disrespect to anybody, not to offend anyone, but I referred to it as my Hitlerian phase. And I did just exactly what you said you don't want to do. I told people what to do because I'm the operations manager, darn it.
Yeah.
And I got challenged by one of my employees, says, I'm not going to do it. I said, why? Why not? It's because you're telling me not to do it. So I rephrased it. I said, okay, I need you to, and I think it was like, clean the bathroom, because we didn't have a cleaning service out at the transmitter site.
Mm-hmm.
And I cleaned the bathrooms as well on my shifts. We need to have the bathrooms clean so that when we have programmers in here or other people, we need to have it clean for them. So, all right, I'll do it for that reason, but not because you tell me to.
Right.
After that confrontation, I sat back and I thought about my style. I said, I got to stop doing that. That's not working, obviously. So I started to come at it from a whole different perspective. Here is the plus about all of these jobs I've had as operations manager. I was also doing exactly the same job that everybody I was supervisor over.
Right.
And I never looked at it as them working for me. I looked at it as me working with them.
That's right.
And so like I said, that was a very short-lived phase, thank goodness. But we have a lot of people in leadership and non-leadership positions. They want to hold on to their territory as if it belongs to them. And yet they're an employee of said business, company, corporation. I find that interesting. That people want to, I don't want to hold on to my territory. I found out early on, Mike, that if I hold on to the knowledge that I have and I don't share it with anybody else, I'm going to keep it close to the vest because I don't want anybody else to know how to do this. I can't move on and do anything new.
Right.
Do we see that as a problem, territorial employees? All the way up the corporate ladder or business ladder or company ladder. Is that still a major problem that we're having trouble with? Or are some of the leaders in business starting to read some of the books? Let's just say that your publishing company, which by the way is Leadership, and I just had it in front of me here, leadershipbooks.com. Do you see them as starting to read some of these books that say, look, you've got to relate to your employees? That's why I always loved Undercover Boss.
Yes. So it's a big area of learning and growth, especially if you've reached middle management at some level, and you're finding that you're not achieving what you think you ought to achieve because the staff around you, the people that are supposed to be following you, are being resistant. And I tell this story, the other day. Now remember, who do we serve? That's the question. Who do we serve? Okay, so we always have to keep that in mind. So the other day I was at a restaurant, and a young woman walked by that worked there, and I asked her. She was not my waitress, or my server, I should say. And the server I hadn't seen in a while, and I'd actually wanted a cup of coffee to go along with my meal. My meal had been served, and now I wanted to have something to go along with it. So as she walked by, I asked her, "Could you get me a cup of coffee, please?" And she walked over to the manager, and I saw this happen. She walked over to the manager, and the manager chastised her and pointed at the ground and told her, "Your job is to sweep the floor." And you know what I never got? Was a cup of coffee.
Ooh.
Now, I don't understand her infrastructure of what this manager was doing inside of this restaurant, but I can tell you that the person that they serve, which is the customer, didn't get served. All right. And because of her hierarchical, patriotic, paternal kind of overview of her leadership style,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't serve her customer. And that will eventually get you. That will eventually eat your business alive. And so the idea of who are we serving here is the most important piece, I think, for a leader to understand, and to stay loyal to that service. If you're serving the stockholders of your business, the shareholders of your business, and the board, then that's who you need to be thinking about with every decision that you make. And so we can't really be upset with the boardroom who is making decisions in favor for their shareholders. And it's the executive leadership that should be making decisions for their staff and employees that's best serving them. And the staff and employees should be making decisions that's best serving their customer. And the government's no different. We have a leadership right now who just does whatever they want, and they're not very concerned with, the broader reach, I should say. They're concerned with a sector of the American society to serve, but they're not interested in a broader reach of serving the entire country, and that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
And, even those that represent us, that's what they're there for, is to represent. Again, I'm in Northern Nevada, so they're here to represent me in Northern Nevada. They're there to represent you in California, and they're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so this idea, and it all came. I read a lot of books, and I hear some of the best and experience some of the best voices in leadership. Okay, as you can imagine, and it still boils down to, who are we serving?
Yeah.
Not who are we controlling. Who are we serving?
Yeah. And of course, we here on this program, we are serving the listener. We're trying to serve them information that will help to better their lives. New Paradigms for a New World is sort of our slogan, giving people choices and knowledge of those choices. Defining that, basically, a lot of times we don't know what choices we have available to us until we are educated on the reality of those choices. You've got a fork in the road. Yeah, well, how many fingers or tans? I forget what the heck the name of the prongs on the fork are called. But nonetheless, you might have 2, you might have 3, you might have 4. But if, let's just say, there's a heavy fog that's descended, you can't see those other forks, those other possible choices that you could make until the fog lifts. And that's what we're trying to do, is lift the fog here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. I'm here with Mike Stickler. He
right.
is with the leadershipbooks.com website. We hope that you will find out more about that work by going to leadershipbooks.com. And Mike, what I find interesting about what you said in terms of who do we serve? A lot of people in again, all of the categories that we've already talked about, down through the years. And, it may be this, on a governmental level, it might be this administration, but quite honestly, every administration we have ever had, at least in my short 62 years on the planet, has kind of been that way. They're serving themselves in some fashion and a certain segment of the population, but not all. And there's a difference between serving and pleasing. They say that you can please some of the people some of the time, but you cannot please all of the people all of the time. That's different from serving the people. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have, especially governmentally, is the fact that a lot of those that are supposed to represent us, they are only in office to get reelected. That's all they're.
Right.
After they get elected, it's now time to start planning for the next election. It doesn't matter if it's 2 years or 6 years away. It's time to start planning. And then making sure that you get just the right photo ops so that people will see that, oh, look, they're standing next to a bridge that's being built, or they're whatever it is. And I mentioned it before about the Undercover Boss television program.
Right.
I unfortunately, because I've always worked for small stations, I could never do that,
Right.
But I've always found it, I was always so impressed by the surprise and awe of the one going undercover at what they would find as they would travel around to the different departments or franchises or whatever outlets of their company they had. Surprised because they didn't know, surprised because they start to get to know the people who are actually making the money that the head who's undercover are, so to speak, raking in. And this is what has frustrated, I know, a lot of people about a lot of CEOs who get these annual bonuses. And I sit there going, well, what did they do?
Right.
Did they do what the people down at the bottom of the pyramid were doing in terms of justifying this multi-million-dollar bonus? And I have to say, I don't think so. I just don't know what it is that they do. And then, of course, you see the separation of the classes, and they maintain that. And I'm not saying that that the CEO's office should be, let's say, in the front lobby of the Starbucks. Okay, I'm not saying
Sure.
certainly, there is a separation in that regard between those who make the decisions on how the place is going to look and what they're going to serve, and then those people that are working there. The people that should be making the money are the people that are doing the serving, like the waitress that you had an experience with. She should be the one making the money, not the guy at the top, because she's doing the work. She's doing the serving. Do you think that many businesses are starting to get that? And again, I understand too about, raising minimum wages and all of that. And that sounds like a great idea, but somebody's got to pay for it. And who's going to pay for it? The consumer, those being served. But we won't go there, but let's talk about this aspect of some companies are actually starting to recognize and acknowledge the value of the people they have working for them, or I'd like to say with them.
Yeah, that's a challenging position. I'm about the same age as you are. And one of the challenges, we went through the 80s and the 90s where we did a lot of corporate sharing, where the employee would become part of the ownership of the company. We did a lot of different kinds of things in those days to really to have them be inclusive and the proverbial the rising tide raises all boats. So if we're making more money, they're making more money, and everybody's is growing. And what's funny is it didn't work. Retention didn't change. The people still came and went. And now, as we've come into the younger generation, when we talk about the millennials and those, they change pretty regularly. They don't even think twice about changing from job to job. And here's where I think it makes a difference, where it really makes a difference. And you alluded to it a little bit ago, is about serving those that are working around you and pleasing those that are working around you. Now, if another area of leadership that we have, Richard, is in our home. Mm-hmm. Whether you're mom or dad, you have a responsibility to serve, and that doesn't always mean, especially with your children, pleasing them. Okay, mm-hmm. They don't necessarily have the full picture of life in front of them yet, so trying to please them is actually very dangerous and detrimental to them. And so what I love about your picture of the undercover boss is, here's the boss who's getting down into the trenches and really figuring out, okay, well, what's going on here? We implemented these procedures in order to best serve, or they believe that in order to best serve whatever constituency they're trying to serve. And then they get into it and they find out it's not being executed, all right, the way they think. And so what I love about that show most is it causes the leader, whoever they are, to really do some, if they're humble enough, to do some introspection on themselves to say, have we really done this well? Because obviously we're not executing, at least some of them are not executing what we think is going to happen. And then that has to happen more and more. I don't care if you're the CEO of Chevron Oil or who you are. You need to start to really get down and figure out, are the troops really doing what we asked them to do? And what do I have to do with the enormous power that I have? As I'm speaking as if I'm the CEO. Mm-hmm. What do I have to do with my enormous power to help them all get on the right track, to actually execute the way we want it to do? Not to please them necessarily, but to please our customer, whoever that is. And those are the challenges that, the larger the business is. And that's what leadership, and why leadership books exist, and why the trainers and people that equip that in leadership try to help those men and women be able to do that. So there's a more holistic approach. Mm-hmm. And with that comes a better balance of quality of life and a quality of income. By the way, I think one of the unintended consequences of this whole pandemic is there is a major shift going on right now with people wanting to work from home. I was just reading some statistics on a tech firm in the Bay Area, which told everybody that they had to work 60% of the time in the office, and the entire staff said nope. And so they went, okay, 20% in the office. They started negotiating with their own staff because they've come to the realization that the staff working from home is more productive. It's better. It's a better work-life balance. There's a lot of pieces that are going on that they never considered before. And those, I make a prediction to you, those CEOs who listen to their employees are going to have a better retention level to their employees, and more productive and happy employees, which they're not necessarily getting more money. In a way they are, but what they're really getting is a better life. And that's what this generation's looking for when it comes to staff.
Mike Stickler's my guest, and leadershipbooks.com is the website. We certainly hope that you will go there and check this out. We got a whole lot more to talk about as far as leadership is concerned. Here on Tell Me Your Story, I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I do greatly appreciate the time that you are giving us, Mike, to talk about these kinds of things, because one of the aspects of this that you touched upon, the CEO says, how can I, with the power that I have? And at the same time, you also elucidated that the CEO has no power, that the employees don't give him or her.
That's right.
If he says,
That's right.
I have the power up here on this throne here, we're going to work 60% in the office and 40% at home, and the employees take their power back and say, nope, not going to happen, Tim. And I realize that it's a rather controversial subject, unions.
Yep.
There is a way to unionize without actually unionizing when the employees get together and they say, look, it's not that we're dissatisfied with our jobs, but certain conditions have got to be met when it comes to this situation. And as such, it's kind of along the lines of, I was thinking about this in terms of where one of the first jobs in radio that I had, we worked out at the transmitter. And at that time, back in 1979, 1980, it was out in what we called the South 40 in West Phoenix. And actually, it was a small community called Tolleson, Arizona. And it was literally on a 7-acre plot that was bordered on the south side by the Southern Pacific Railroad tracks and farm fields. And we had to keep the building clean on the inside, at least. And it wasn't that hard of a job to do because it wasn't that big of a building,
Right.
But that's what we did, and that's how that's because it was our home for 8 hours a day. That was when you worked 8-hour shift in radio. And I remember an experience that I had with my general manager. He and I had worked on redesigning the interior. We created a whole a construction company came in and put up some walls and so forth and so on, and then we put up the counter space to put the equipment on, and we had this one cabinet up against the back wall underneath a window, and he said to me, "Now don't you move that unless you get my permission," which I thought was an interesting and bizarre directive. And one day, while I was training another gentleman who became a very good friend of mine, who has unfortunately since passed, I moved that cabinet because I was vacuuming the floor. Guess who came in the front door?
Yeah.
Reamed me a new one. Took me into the transmitter room, and I thought he was going to punch me, and I swear I thought I was going to get hit. I couldn't sleep for 3 days. I finally called him. I says, we have to talk. I need you to come out here and we have to talk. He came out and I told him, do you know that I completely forgot the reason why I had moved that cabinet when you were yelling at me? And now I remember I was vacuuming. I was cleaning the station. And I was going to put it back where it was, but you showed up and interrupted the process.
Right.
Could not have been more apologetic, which I appreciated. But if he had waited to find out why I had moved the cabinet in the first place, none of this would have happened.
Yeah, and that's a subject matter that is really near and dear to my heart. Is this idea of listening to understand instead of listening to respond. We have this tendency, especially leaders, we have this tendency to approach a subject that we think is going the wrong way. We ask the question, and then we're actually, while the answer is coming, and the other party is giving us the answer, we're formulating the response in our head. We're not listening to what the person's saying. And so then we just burst into it. I see this in marriages. I see it in employee relationships. And we got to shut our mouths long enough to and actively listen to understanding what that person says. And we're getting worse and worse at it as a society, where we used to quietly listen to someone's opinion or idea, and then we would respond to it. No. Now we just blurt out. It's like we're all on a TV show now. We all just blurt out at one another what we think about that. And it's a horrible way to communicate. And it's even a more horrible way to try to run an organization if you don't take the time to listen. If he'd have just listened to you for 1 minute and realized that what you had done, because he created so much pressure in the room, you couldn't even remember yourself why you moved the stupid cabinet. Mm-hmm. And instead, if you just sat there and he approached it, and just said, well, Richard, I'm not sure. Is there a reason you moved this cabinet? And you said, well, yeah, I'm vacuuming. And he actually heard that. Mm-hmm. He would have had a response. It would have been much different. And that's where we're failing as leaders, is not listening to people that are around us. Yeah. And you know what? Maybe they did make a mistake. Okay. But you're never going to help them learn not to make that mistake again if you just jump on your soapbox and start, berating people. That's just abusive anyway. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Michael Stickler's my guest. Leadershipbooks.com is the website. I'm Richard Dugan, and you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. We are bringing you new paradigms for a new world. We're looking for those new ways of living. The old ways, just look around you. They aren't working. So we've got to come up with those new ways, and Mike is here to help us out. It's interesting, too, based upon that example I gave you, two things happened. One prior to that event that happened to me where I was on the other end where my general manager was at that time, where I was on the phone with this woman. She was the principal of a school who was, she was supposed to be doing these little vignettes for us that I would record and produce and so forth. And I'd been trying for 2 weeks to get her, and I finally got her, but I was fit to be tied. And I said some things to her on the phone. Nobody deserves to be spoken to the way I spoke to this woman. And I remember after getting off the phone with her that my boss, the same one, had told me he does not like surprises. So I immediately called him and I owned up to what I had done. And he said, first of all, you are on probation for 60 days. Second of all, you're going to call that woman back and you're going to apologize. As soon as I got off the phone with him, I called the woman back and I apologized. And then I heard her ripping me a new one for 5 minutes. When she was done, I apologized again. And I don't know if I wished her a nice day or what have you. I said, nobody deserves to be spoken to the way I spoke to you. I am very sorry, blah, 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 blah. And we ended. Obviously, she didn't do those vignettes anymore with us because I had damaged that relationship.
Sure.
But the second example was after the cabinet moving incident, years later, at another radio station where I was working. The company that I was working for was running a news talk station. The religious station where that first general manager was purchased by the corporation that ran the news talk station I was working for. So they moved us all into the same suite together. Here I am with that general manager again. We were redesigning the news talk control room. I was in charge of making sure that everything went properly, and the information that I had received from outside sources regarding our equipment and software was that, no, you don't want to do that because it's not ready yet. You don't have the coding. But the chief engineer said, no, it'll work. And I said, well, you may think it'll work, but I haven't, based upon the information I have been given, we're not going to move forward until we get the coding. I was called into the general manager's office, now not the one from the Christian station, but the one from the news talk station. But the one from the Christian station was sitting in the conference room with us. Mm-hmm. And basically, I was following the directives told to me by the software company. And so I sat in the room as the Christian station manager sat in his chair listening to the News Talk general manager circling me in the conference table around and around and around, ranting and raving. I sat in what they call open body posture, you both feet on the floor, hands on your knees. I had to do everything I could do to keep from laughing. Because first of all, having had the experience with the Christian manager, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I was doing my job by protecting the station and making sure we stayed on the air based upon the information I had at the time. And he told me that the chief engineer, who is one of the best chief engineers in all of the country, just quit. Like that's my fault? Did he quit? Right. He's got very thin skin. And I never uttered a bad word to him or about him. And this guy went around the table, around and around, and I everything I could do to keep from laughing. And when I left the room, I felt really good. Then I finally got the information from the software company. Oh, well, actually, we misspoke. You could hook it up now. It's just that the hardware won't function 100%. It'll function 80%, and it'll give you what you want until we get you the coding for the 100%. So the chief engineer was correct, but because I was instructed to make sure that this went smoothly, the way they were phrasing it from the software company. So there's another situation where people aren't listening. And this is back in the 2000s, early 2000s. How do we overcome that? How do we, as both managers, supervisors, and employees, or those being managed or supervised, how do we overcome that breakdown in communication? And by the way, in broadcasting, I've learned we broadcasters, behind the scenes, are some of the worst communicators.
So as a leader, the first thing you have to understand is what's the chief form of communication for the team that you have with us around you. So I remember years ago, I had a gal who was a phenomenal writer, but she was kind of awkward in verbal communication. She was a little insecure. She didn't like to stand up in front of people and make presentations and those kinds of things. And she and I were in kind of an emotionally charged conversation about her work performance. And I could tell that was difficult for her because she doesn't do verbal communication as well as she does written communication. So I just said to her, I said, would you do me a favor? I know you're trying to express your feelings here. Would you do me a favor and just go back to your desk and write them out for me and give me an opportunity to read them, and then we'll discuss them. And I could see right at that moment that she just kind of, the pressure just came off of her, and she went in, and within minutes I got her response. Well, other people are verbal communicators, and I'm one of those. I prefer to communicate verbally. So let's sit down and talk with that person and give them the uninterrupted time that they want, the uninterrupted time that they deserve and they want. I'm one of those, and I prefer not to have what I used to call water cooler conversations, where somebody just brings up a subject matter by the water cooler and then wants you to give them an answer, because I can't ask the clarifying questions. I can't think deeply about it. I can't get into the things that we want to do, or what they're really asking me to do in a short amount of time. And so I fail at it. I often make bad decisions. And so in the same way, if we get a hold of how the person that you're working with communicates, and then try to allow them, especially in the more difficult types of communication we're faced with, allow them to use their primary way to communicate with you, and then take the time to genuinely listen. We all have to just be a lot more intentional and quit, thinking we're all on, virtual Facebook, where we're just leaving nasty, snotty comments at one another, trying to be witty, and we're failing, but we're trying to be witty and all this. And instead, take the time. one of the things I do, here's another good practice, is if I don't know somebody very well, or I suspect that we have an opposing view on something, I start out with something personal. I'll say something with, so Richard, are you a dad? How many kids do you have? Or I try to find a point that a commonality that we can both start with before we get into that highly charged confrontational piece. I also, with everyday communication, when I talk to my assistant every day, I start out with, first thing I say is, Simone, how are you doing? Things going okay with you today? What'd you do over the weekend? I start with a personal connection first before we get right to the business. But see, we're so busy doing this fast-paced nonsense, Facebook nonsense, that we're not actually making a whole connection with people. And if we just would get it in the practice and be more intentional in what we're doing, we would communicate much better to one another. We would have the respect that we actually want, often mistakenly demand instead of earn. We'll all get to the same place that we want to, whatever that goal is that we're trying to achieve. Whether it's making more money or making a difference. If you've got a nonprofit, maybe you're trying to make a difference in your community, or see people's lives change. Whatever you're trying to do as a goal, everybody will get there if you're just a little bit more intentional about it. And by the way, that doesn't mean have more meetings. Okay. So if anybody that's a manager just heard me and said, "Oh, okay, Mike says have more meetings," that's not what I said.
Yeah.
Okay. Worthless meetings are probably the greatest way of telling someone you're not interested in what they actually have to say.
Yeah.
Good, solid communication, and just being practiced at it.
Yeah.
We have to be practiced at it.
Mike Stickler's my guest, publisher and author as well, and leadershipbooks.com is the website. And this is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we are here discussing leadership. We could certainly move into some other areas, but you brought up something very interesting, especially in terms of sort of knowing your audience of sorts. I was back home in Phoenix for my sister's memorial back in April, and we had gone to the memorial. Myself, my brother, my mother. She had driven us, and when we came back, it was my niece, my mother, and myself, and we went back to my parents' condo where my brother and I were staying. And as you noticed, my brother was not with us on the return trip. He stayed at my sister's house for a little longer. We get home, and my dad was not able to make it to the memorial. He's got some issues in that regard, but he was able to watch it on Zoom, which was really great. He was able to watch the memorial. And so we get home. We're there talking around the dining room table, and he comes walking up, and he says, "Where's Michael?" And I said, well, and my brother loves to joke around, okay? He's the guy who, I don't know whether it's a defense mechanism on his part or he's just trying to be the center of attention or what the reason is, but he's always making jokes about all of us and so forth. So I thought I would try with my father, who's 91 this year, and he comes up, where's your brother Michael? And I said, "Well, Dad, I'm so sorry. We had to sell him to put gas in the car." I thought it was pretty funny. My dad jumped all over me, said, "Look, when I ask a question, I want an answer." I said, "I'm sorry. I apologize." He stayed back. He stayed back at Mary's. Da 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 da. Later that evening, as I'm making up the couch in the living room to go to sleep, my brother got the extra bedroom, and I said that was fine. My father comes in and he apologized. He says, "I am so sorry for getting so upset with you." It was nice. I didn't take offense. I didn't take it in when he jumped on me like that. I just figured, I crossed the line. I'll back it off, apologize, and move on.
Right.
So I took him by the shoulders. I said, "Dad, you will always be my father, and I will always love you, and we're good." And we get a little hug there, and then he went off to bed. And first of all, what it told me was, I'll leave the jokes to my brother and let him deal with my dad, kind
Yeah.
of. But it also showed me that my father, even at the age of 91, with the level of frustration, having had to bury one of his daughters, still, he was obviously, he was on edge at that particular moment, but also recognizes when he has sort of, crossed a line,
Yeah.
even with his children. So anyway, I think that even within the context of a family, I think it's really important when you take a look at the dynamics. I mean, we had 4 sisters, a brother, and 2 parents in a little over a 1,300 square foot brick 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home.
Oh,
5
right.
women in a 1-bathroom home, and we all came out alive.
Yeah. You know what?
Go ahead.
What's amazing about that story? First off, is your dad's self-awareness at 91. Okay, so one of the things about being a leader is we have to have a pretty high level of self-awareness. Now, we all make mistakes. When pressure is happening around us, and in this case, his daughter is passed. He's emotionally trying to probably keep that somewhat contained. You uncharacteristically started, making a joke. He didn't think it was funny because he was just on the edge, and then being self-aware enough to apologize. And I don't think we leaders take enough time to really get self-aware of our own situation that's going on. I remember when I was younger, when my kids were at home, my oldest is 40 now, and I have grandchildren. So, but when they were at home, high school and middle school age, I was working all day, and I would come home, and they would be almost waiting, not literally, but almost waiting at the door to come bring me something or show me something or tell me a story or whatever. And my wife was kind of in that place too. And I always would stiff arm them as I came through the door, maybe not physically, but emotionally stiff arm them. And then I would go in the back room and change my clothes, get out of my work clothes, get into something comfortable, usually get a little bit to drink. And then I would talk to him. Well, my wife said, "Why do you do that? Why are you stiff arming them?" And I didn't really know why. And what she and I figured out is what I had to do this transition. I don't know why, but I had Mike's business, mind on, and my suit and all of that. And as I came through the door, this is what I had on. And I needed to physically transition, take off my clothes, maybe grab a beer, settle down, put on some comfortable clothes, come out, and now transition to family Mike. And I wasn't self-aware enough back then in my 30s. I wasn't self-aware enough to realize I had to do that. And it was through the guidance with my wife helping me understand that this is what was going on and how I was presenting myself, helped me understand how I behave. So as a leader, we're not stopping to recognize what's informing our feelings and our decision process. It could be anything. It could be not eating. It could be pressure from the last meeting you were in. Maybe you got some bad news from outside of the business realm, wherever you're working. Lots of things could happen. And really being self-aware about what's going on. And then when you mess up, and we all do, quickly apologize as fast as you become aware that you messed up. Just secondarily as fast, go and apologize. So as soon as you're aware that you messed up, go and do it. And then if the person, as you explained about that one customer or that wasn't happy and reamed you out, well, that's on them now. You did your part. I apologized. And if it was sincere, you did all you could do. And if she wants to berate you after that, well, that's on them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what she should have done after that was hang up and apologize, come back and apologize to you later, but you did your part.
Yeah.
We're supposed to seek forgiveness, not get forgiveness.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We're supposed to seek it, but we don't have to get it. That we did our part.
Right.
Otherwise that person controls you with it.
Right. What about the thoughts of self-forgiveness?
That's often really a little harder, but it's very much the truth. The realization is that you have, again, back to being a leader. When I really mess up, it costs the company money, or it costs, my reputation or whatever. I confess and tell people, this is the part that I did. And then I forgive myself for it and I move on. I'm not going to carry a bunch of shame behind it. And I think you have to do the first one first. In other words, confess it, say it, look, I did this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then once that's out in the air, it becomes a lot easier to forgive yourself. If you try to hide it and you try to pretend like it didn't happen or whatever, that shame just gobbles you up. And shame, by the way, says to you, I am what I am and I cannot change. Well, if you're hiding what happened by not just getting it out into the air, shame has a tendency to just build upon itself to where I am what I am and I cannot change and I feel terrible about this and I can't forgive myself because I should have done better, and on and on and on of the things that we go through. And recognize that others might not forgive you. Well, that doesn't mean you should feel shame yourself just because we all mess up. Mm-hmm. We all mess up. And some of us have consequences. Maybe the mess up, your consequence is you get fired. Okay. Maybe the consequence is you go to jail. Maybe the consequence is, but failing forward is the gift here, is to have an opportunity to reinvent yourself and learn from your mistakes and going forward. That's the gift. Yeah. And messing up.
Mike Stickler's my guest. LeadershipBooks.com is the website, and you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it's really a pleasure to have you here on the program, Mike, to talk about this aspect of leadership. It's, I think, a very important element that we are all leaders at some time throughout our lives. We're all sometimes asked to take on a leadership role.
That's right.
Along the way in our lives, and it would be really helpful if we had some guidance, and you provide that through the work that you are doing, both as a publisher and an author, as well as a leader, a leadership mentor or counselor or advisor, shall we say. And we are greatly appreciative of the time that you have given us, and I thank you so much for sharing what you've shared here today. I do have 3 final questions that I'd like to ask you. I ask all of my guests on this program, and you may have answered them during the interview, but I like to ask them directly, even though the answers will probably be the same. Even in the context of the 3 questions, they may sound similar, but you can answer them in any way you wish to. But before I ask you those questions, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., and Wednesday mornings for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts both at richarddugan.com as well as SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations across the internet. We also ask that you go to YouTube and watch these interviews. That's right, we have a YouTube channel, Tell Me Your Story, Richard Dugan. We also ask that you subscribe, not to raise my numbers of subscribers. No, I don't care about that. But so that you will be notified of new interviews that are posted throughout the days and weeks ahead. So please do that. Also, participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s, as we ask you to go within and listen to that still small voice of encouragement and insight and inspiration and Who knows? Maybe even a laugh or two. It's your inner life, folks. Make it what you will and enjoy it. I know that I do. And also, if you can support us financially, we'd greatly appreciate that. You might be laughing at this. That's fine. We have a PayPal account. It's there for your security as well as ours. Any amount is welcome. We'll even take energetic support as well. With that, let me ask the first of the three questions. Who is Mike Stickler?
First and foremost, I'm a child of God. I'm an author. I'm a guy who desires deep and meaningful relationships.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
What I love about leadership books and being an author is that the books that we offer really do make your life, your family, your business a little bit better. And that's what gets me up in the morning and helps me keep focused on what I do.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
It's much deeper than a simple answer, but my life's purpose is to serve God and to serve people. That's my life purpose.
And Mike, I want to thank you again for joining us. This has been a very meaningful, informative, and enlightening perspective. And I hope that people will take it to heart. I know I will, because, as I said before, we are all going to be leaders at some time in our life, if only leaders of self. But that would be with a small s. Thank you very much. So thank you again for joining us.
This has been a great experience. Thank you.
And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, as we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal and Jeanette, I am listening.